sugar, so ready for this final session. There'll be two papers that will be presented, and then there'll be another panel. So first up this afternoon is Andrew Cattell. We are looking at the certification and inspection procedures with alternative energy vehicles. One of the things that we're conscious of is that as we move into new technology, there are new widgets and gadgets, but they all need to fit within the regulations that are either current or need to be modified accordingly, and that was kind of highlighted by TRA and others this morning. So without further ado, I'll ask Andrew, who's part of the CITA working group in the UK, to give his paper on certification inspection procedures with alternative energy vehicles. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for inviting me to speak about certification and periodic technical inspection, known as PTI, of motor vehicles using alternate energy or indeed alternate driving systems. I hope I can provide you with some interesting thoughts for the afternoon. I've been involved with motor vehicle compliance and testing for over 40 years and have developed inspection manuals that follow the compliance with European directives and more recently a heavy vehicle inspection manual for Abu Dhabi and indeed for other countries. I've represented the UK in a number of areas that include as a policy expert on continuous compliance with CITA, the International Association of Public and Private Sector organisations actively practising compulsory inspection of in-service motor vehicles, together with the responsibility for authorising and supervising inspection organisations. I was head of regulatory change for the Driver and Vehicle Standards Agency, with responsibility for introducing compliance and PTI systems following regulatory changes within GB and in the EU. I am passionate about making sure that motor vehicles continue to be compliant throughout their lifetime cycle. Last year, at the first conference, I presented an overview of the requirements for the introduction of alternate energy vehicles into the PTI examination. Key to this was the familiarity of components and indeed their classification. Here you will see that I've identified important components and split them into necessary components and indeed optional components. Each component will have a contribution or an effect upon road safety, and the PTI will be required to assess the degradation or ageing of components due to wear and how they interact with other components. The PTI also has an obligation to consider the effect of manipulation upon components that could affect traffic safety or environmental aspects. Also at the first conference, we identified that PTI regulators or service providers should undertake a comprehensive assessment of the risks, which is critical to make sure that vehicle inspectors are aware of the implications when conducting certification or inspections on alternative energy vehicles. Let us now take this one step further with looking firstly at the UAE federal legislation that underpins PTI. Federal Law 21 concerning traffic was put into place in 1995, and Article 37 of that law states all types of motor vehicles shall be subject to a technical inspection carried out by the licensing authority pursuant to the provisions of this chapter, with the exception of those vehicles exempted from the requirements of registration and licensing. This now provides us with the foundation block for the PTI, Periodic Technical Inspection. But what should that technical inspection include? The release of GSO 971, which identifies the requirements for the periodic technical inspection, provides a sound base to start. But as you can see, its production in 1997 suggests that the requirements within are almost 20 years old and could never have foreseen the advances in modern technology, particularly the speed at which alternative energy vehicles and autonomous vehicles will dominate the next few decades. Test items in GSO 971 provide the foundation for the PTI examination. Over time, as vehicle design develops, the list of inspection items will change to accommodate modern vehicles. The current test items in GSO 971 include brakes, steering and suspension, lighting, electric wiring and battery, glazing, mirrors, washers and wipers, seat belts, body interior and exhaust and fuel systems, and of course emissions. In addition, the GSO provides information on the methods of inspection and the reasons for failure, so that regulators and service providers have a sound and, more importantly, consistent base to work from. It is likely that each Gulf state or emirate will adjust their PTI standard from this base point to a level that meets their requirements. So what do we have to do to update this GSO list and reflect future mobility? To help provide an overview of the relevant legislation, this slide shows the interactions at various pieces of GB legislation and how they feed into the GB PTI regulations. The legislation is presented here to help to provide an understanding of the framework with which PTI must operate within. In UAE, federal relevant laws must now be considered together with ministerial resolutions and indeed Gulf standards, and of course how they interact with each other as parts of your legislation. It is also correct that the perspective of harmonisation between Gulf states should be considered. It is imperative that this forum looks further than their own borders and considers PTI in relation to future mobility across the Gulf region to attain a universal standard. PTI can be provided in many different ways. These examples show heavy vehicle sectors in UAE and light vehicle sectors in GB, ranging from state-of-the-art modern facilities to much simpler buildings, both designed to provide the customer with a satisfactory PTI experience. Gulf states should consider developing other areas surrounding the PTI examination that includes standardised facilities, equipment, quality assurance methods, and of course the level of inspector competence. National regulators need to consider how the service is delivered. GB systems are based around a mix of centralised government-based inspections and decentralised private garages that are monitored by government. Regardless of how this service is delivered, all the regulators and service providers should develop quality assurance tools to ensure a consistent level of service is provided for customers. The path to making sure all vehicles remain roadworthy is known as continuous compliance, and this is supported by the PTI system. To ensure continuous compliance, we have to share the responsibility for making sure that PTI inspectors are fully knowledgeable about the systems they have to inspect. For example, how many inspectors will know the difference between a parallel hybrid and series hybrid vehicle? Indeed, does this influence or affect the PTI characteristics? The release of mainstream plug-in electric hybrid vehicles brings with it its own complications. Will the inspector be required to have additional tools or equipment to check the plug-in electronics? Therefore, we must make sure that this responsibility is shared between the vehicle manufacturer, the vehicle owner, and the regulator and authority. Similarly, continuous compliance starts at the build stages, where at approval, vehicles have to meet the highest safety standards. The approval requirements contain test methods and efficiency standards. However, the requirements do not give technical design solutions for the PTI examination. At PTI, we have to consider all the safety features that were installed into the vehicle when it was brought into service, the degradation and wear of all the equipment, and indeed any retrofitting requirements or other features. It is with this in mind that we need the manufacturers to share as much technical data as possible for each vehicle. Significantly, EC regulations exist to promote this and entrust that manufacturers will provide unrestricted and standardised access to vehicle repair and maintenance information. This should be provided to independent operators through websites using standardised format and of course in a readily accessible and prompt manner. It must also be non-discriminatory compared to the provision given or the access granted to authorised dealers or repairers. Such information should include service and technical handbooks, component and diagnosis data, and other useful information that can assist the regulatory authority or service provider in providing the standards for PTI examination. To give you some idea of the scale of how that information should be disseminated, here is the data from the GB PTI system, where we have around 22,000 individual sites carrying out PTI, using around 55,000 inspectors, able to conduct around 32 million PTI examinations each year. With the introduction of hybrid electric vehicles and indeed electric vehicles, it is likely that we shall see a steady increase in PTI examinations. However, developing countries may see a dramatic rise that demands a much more agile approach. GB has been conducting PTI examinations for almost 50 years and still continue to develop. Gulf states should consider the foundation of continuous compliance and PTI in order to build a successful and, more importantly, sustainable road safety strategy that revolves around continuous compliance. Let us take a look now at the equipment requirements for the assessment of high voltage batteries and other voltage requirement components. Inspectors may have to use an interface. It may be that the interconnectivity that we've mentioned today may require some annual assessment. Equipment like this will enable the inspector to check the correct function of the battery management system or the isolation between the high voltage components and the onboard power supply or other connective functions. Additional checks of the braking system, particularly if the vehicle is fitted with regenerative braking systems, where this forms part of the foundation brakes, may still be required. And any other interaction, such as the starting prevention when the vehicle is still connected to the power supply. The concept behind PTI is that a vehicle should be presented for inspection, should be able to be fully inspected. However, if there is an issue, it means that an aspect of the vehicle cannot be tested due to the vehicle configuration. The vehicle is often inspected as it is presented. This comes from the principle that PTI should be visual and that no significant alterations should be made on site to the vehicle so that it can be inspected. It is with this idea that forms the approach that could be taken to hybrid electric vehicles and electric vehicles so that they can be inspected under the current scheme. The transition in technology from the internal combustion engine to the hybrid electric vehicle and then to plug-in electric hybrid vehicles and ultimately towards the pure electric vehicle where there is complete reliance upon the batteries for power shows the greatest departure from the standard vehicle technology. But this is restricted to the vehicle powertrain, as most other aspects of the vehicle are similar. Each periodic technical inspection, PTI, it's not working. Each PTI system will need changes over time, and here are 4 examples. It is possible that under some regulatory authorities, hybrid electric vehicles are exempt from the emission test. This is due to the practicality of carrying out the emissions test on such vehicles. The standard method of testing is to indeed accelerate the engine from idle to governed speed by depressing the accelerator pedal. Such action in a hybrid electric vehicle, however, may not be possible as the accelerator pedal does not control the engine. The electronic control unit controls engine speed dependent upon the electrical load that is required. When it's stationary, the vehicle requires no electrical load, therefore the batteries are not being depleted, and the engine will remain at idle or constant speed irrespective of the pedal that's being depressed. Discussion with manufacturers has suggested that testing using this method could be possible, but would require alteration of the final state of the ECU system. It may be possible to do so that the engine performs the desired operation, but often there are recommendations against this, as such action requires changes to the lowest level of the ECU software architecture, something which could cause damage. Brake testing presents further issues where it is essential to determine which vehicles can be tested using a roller brake tester. The decelerometer test can be used for these hybrid electric vehicles or electric vehicles that cannot be tested. However, this style of test does have shortcomings. The test should be viewed that the necessary steps should always be taken to ensure that hybrid electric vehicles and electric vehicles become testable on a roller brake tester. To help provide an understanding of why this is important, inspectors will need to consider the specification of the hybrid electric vehicle or electric vehicle. If it's a larger vehicle with a dual circuit braking system that's operated by full air and supported by regenerative braking system, the regenerative braking system can indeed be viewed as additional. And where it's additional, it can then require a different inspection methodology. Further complications can arise, however, if during the initial braking system approval of the vehicle by the manufacturer, the regenerative braking system is included as part of the braking approval test. It would be difficult to assess the balance between braking retardation from the foundation brakes and that provided by the regenerative braking system. Therefore, manufacturers, regulators, vehicle owners should continue to work together with PTI service providers to provide technical solutions. The electric powertrain and batteries of the hybrid electric vehicles and electric vehicles is significantly different in terms of vehicle technology when compared to a standard vehicle. Electric motors or inverters have rarely been used on this scale in, for example, heavy vehicles, and so may not be included in the inspection standards. It's highly likely that these components will be packaged and enclosed, so it's probable that it will not be possible to carry out a thorough visual inspection. However, should we view the inspection of electrical equipment that is part of the electrical powertrain as a test for functionality, or should we simply ensure that the equipment is safe and presents no risk? Visual inspection of the equipment to ensure that it's not insecure or in such condition that it presents a risk may be sufficient. If so, there needs to be inspection manual reasons for failure to reflect this. For hydrogen-powered vehicles, there already exists comprehensive health and safety guidance on the correct procedure for handling this product. Early versions will be representative of a cautious approach to ensure that all who come into contact with such vehicles are appropriately trained, and indeed that the facilities where these vehicles will have to undergo a PTI examination have been approved by a regulator. Where hydrogen vehicles are submitted for inspection, adequate provision should be made in developing suitable facilities. As numbers of hydrogen-powered vehicles continue to increase, the current arrangements may not be adequate, and it would be necessary to develop further training of vehicle inspectors. So what should be our long-term goal in relation to the certification inspection of alternate energy vehicles and indeed autonomous vehicles? Here are 4 proposals we should work towards. Update GSO 971, which currently forms the basis of the PTI platform. Consequently, it is likely that this will reflect in legislation amendments. We should continue to develop the principles of continuous compliance. And lastly, make information easy to access for all concerned. It is likely that these 4 items will bring about benefit solutions. These will provide us with clear win-win situations as far as benefits for road safety, benefits for society, benefit for citizen, benefit for authority, and indeed benefit for the economy or industry. In summary, there are 3 action points I would suggest. GCC should provide an up-to-date PTI platform and indeed a compliance strategy. Gulf states should provide the national environment by updating or providing inspection manuals or database, and industry should provide the supporting data. And please, my last remaining thought for this is, please don't ever forget that whilst all these new vehicle concepts and designs are discussed here today, when these vehicles are 10 years old, it will be our children who will be sitting behind the steering wheel. Therefore, we have a personal and moral responsibility to make sure, through continuous compliance and PTI, that these vehicles are safe and roadworthy. Thank you.